Steve Hauck in studio here this morning. The Austin...
Nice segue from Mr. Potato Head.
Yeah, sorry about
Appreciate
that. Well, considering you just called Andrew Madlock based on the suit that he's wearing. Okay.
You won a lot of cases, Bill.
Yeah. So, if you could, what have we learned about this kid in Texas? Austin, he terrorized the people of Austin.
Yeah.
Setting off bombs, knowing that he could kill or maim people, and just kept doing it until he blew himself up.
Really seems to be a bit of a challenge, I think, about him as a person, because the great thing is he did leave a video behind, so I think they're going to look at that pretty in depth. So they might have some clue as to personally what was going on.
Although we're hearing preliminarily, that he just was describing almost.
Yeah, it was more of a how he did it, not why he did it.
Almost as if he was trying to say, look how smart I was.
Right,
Yeah.
but you wonder if they won't, find something either through like an autopsy.
Yeah.
They look and see if he had something chemical going on there. Or because if you look at his family life, it seemed to be pretty solid. Had roommates, because a lot of times when you see these people, they're loners.
Right.
They've separated themselves from society. They're everybody's against them, sort of thing.
Yeah,
It doesn't
yeah.
seem to be him as a person. Had a job, was close to his family.
Yeah.
Had friends, lived with people.
We just heard on Fox News Top of the Hour, we just heard that they have the families like completely baffled.
Right.
And the aunt saying, I don't know who this person was. I would caution people, and I think it's going to be really interesting to watch and listen for. But in fairness to the Congresswoman, and this is a rare moment for me, although I think I'm always fair, but I'm going to defend her a little bit here, potentially. It'll be interesting to see, because it's starting to come out that he was anti-gay marriage, anti-transgender. It would be interesting if just keep an eye, if somebody were to make that leap. See, it's conservatives. It's this conservative view. These are the people that go and have these mass killings. I wonder both sides. You see where I'm going? I mean, ultimately, it's not the politics.
See, that's my perspective.
It's the brain malfunction.
It
that's
makes
the
zero
issue.
sense to take someone's political idealizations and put them into unless it's the reason they did it.
Right.
That's it. It's
Right.
the only time
Yeah.
it has
And for instance, the shooting of the softball game of the Republican
that, right.
Convention,
It was specific because
they were targeting Republicans. That guy.
And from a law enforcement perspective, we could care less.
Right.
Unless the reason for it is like a hate crime. They did.
Right.
They target a particular group of people based on those beliefs. Other than that, it has no bearing whatsoever.
We know so little. It seems like these cases we end up knowing so little. But do they all want to, in the case of this bomber, do they all want to walk away being notorious? Because it's getting old. I feel like it's getting old and doesn't have the same impact that it used to have.
Well, all we can go by, because when you unless you know so much about the individual person, you go by sort of patterns. And many of these people that do these things, they want to be famous. Obviously, they don't want to get caught.
Right.
But they typically, the way they get famous is by taunting law enforcement. Over the years, we've looked at, serial killers and bombers. That's what they do. They taunt law enforcement letters. Now, that's not to say he couldn't as time went on. Remember, he did a lot of bombing in a very short period of time.
So his is being notorious for being able to outsmart police. That was his, initially it kind of feels like that could be it, based especially on the video message that he left.
Yeah, I would hope that at least down the road they would release some sort of transcript as to what he said. I suspect, based on what the chief said, that, I think he used the word dark.
Yeah.
I suspect that there was maybe some rambling going on there. And again, maybe there was some physical thing going on with him, either medication or maybe he had some illness because it seems out of the norm for him as a person.
Yeah, based
to
on
have
family
done
members.
this.
Yeah.
Based on family, based on the fact that he wasn't a loner, he had a job, he had friends, he lived with people. All those things go against what you normally see in this type of behavior.
I want to bring up a topic that would be close to your line of business. Senator Joe Griffo has co-sponsored a bill, several bills that are out there. This is that time of year. And Joe and I always go back and forth because I never agree with the bills that he sponsors. And here's another one that I don't agree with. And I'd like your take on it. The state Senate has passed several bills to increase protections for law enforcement, firefighters, and other emergency responders. Griffo was a co-sponsor on the Community Heroes Protection Act. I always get nervous when the titles are long and descriptive like this, but I'm not sure I'm comfortable with this one. It would make crimes explicitly committed against law enforcement, firefighters, and first responders punishable as a hate crime. Now, on the surface, that sounds like it makes sense.
That's how it should be.
But it already exists. You can already, if someone commits a crime, correct me if I'm wrong, you can already say, based on their target, based on why they did it, it is a hate crime. This would make that mandatory. This would make it a hate crime. If you go after a police officer, if you're in a bar and you get into a fight with a firefighter,
and you don't know he's a firefighter,
that becomes a hate crime. I'm uncomfortable with legislation like this that takes it takes it away from the prosecutors, it takes it away from the judge to be able to determine what this individual case really is, and almost applies a blanket assessment.
Okay, well, I will tell you this,
and don't get me wrong. I'm not against. It's awful to commit a crime, sure, period. But to do it against a police officer, a firefighter, an ambulance, an EMT person is awful. But at the same time, I think we've got to be careful that we go too. I think we go too far sometimes.
Okay, well, I might be able to calm your concerns a little bit.
Okay, good.
One thing you have to look at when you're dealing with a hate crime is the burden of proof on law enforcement is extremely high on hate crimes.
Yeah.
So to even charge it, you can't just be the officers trying to arrest you and you call him every name in the book and you take a swing and you break his nose. That's not going to automatically say, oh, it's a hate crime.
And I'm okay with that. I think that's the way it should be.
There's a high burden to be able to charge someone with a hate crime. You have to see that they were targeted specifically, all those sorts of things. And then all it really does is affect sentencing.
Right.
Doesn't have anything to do. Doesn't change crimes. So
it puts a little more teeth into the bite.
Right.
I hate to say it, but you're arguing my point. It already exists.
Well, it does on some level.
But this becomes a blanket where if you get into an altercation with a police officer, an EMT person, or a firefighter, you're going to be charged with a hate crime. I'm not comfortable with that.
I don't know that that's, again, I think you could be investigated for it. It doesn't mean you're going to get charged with it.
Yeah, because, you got to look at, too, even on-duty, off-duty situation, that's kind of that situation. But let's say there's
none of us can comment at this point because we have not read the bill. Until I want to read the bill, and we'll talk to Griffo about it. But again, these blanket, the same thing where if you're charged with an order of protection. An order of protection is issued against you. There was a time they wanted to pass a bill where it was mandatory. You had to wear an ankle bracelet. Mandatory. You have to give up your guns. The judge already has the ability to do both of those things. Why not leave it into the judge's hands? Why take it out and then have this blanket penalty that occurs just based on a charge?
Well, again, I don't think, and I did read just a little bit. I didn't read the bill itself, but I read a little bit of the article. I don't think that's what it's calling for. I think it's calling for the option of charge. In other words, you can't
but the option already exists.
Well, it doesn't, because it doesn't relate as it relates to a hate crime. That's the reason why hate crimes are put in there.
But a hate crime would be that you target that person because of who that person is in terms of their job.
So the only thing I can think
of their job, of their religion, of their sex. Mm-hmm. Now you can then go after them as a hate crime, which adds a little more impact to the charge.
Right.
Why do you need a bill when it already exists?
Oh, because hate crimes are specific. Law enforcement wouldn't automatically.
They're not a protected class,
right? It's race. It's not.
My point is, it shouldn't. Why should automatically an altercation against a police officer, a firefighter, an EMT person? Why should that automatically be considered a hate crime when it already exists? That a prosecutor can go forward and charge that person with a hate crime because they could be doing it to a person who isn't a firefighter, who's just gay, or a person who's very religious and conservative. Someone targets that person, it could be thought of as a hate crime. Or someone who's a Baptist, somebody doesn't like Baptists. you can charge them with a hate crime. In the same case, if you were to go after a police officer because of what they do, you could charge them with a hate crime.
You can't. Not now.
You can't?
No. You could under this. There's sections of like the assault law that could make an assault on a police officer or firefighter or EMT a felony versus an assault. How in the past?
If you were this bomber, and this bomber was targeting firefighters because he hated firefighters, that couldn't be considered a hate crime?
No, not in New York State because they're not protected. In other words, they don't. As it goes to related to a hate crime, because a hate crime takes it to a different level when it comes to sentencing. That means you're targeting a specific profession. It would be added to like the race and the gender and sexual orientation would be added to that list, if you will.
So should we include the IRS in this one then? Not just firefighters, but
because everybody wants to go after them.
Radio
DJs,
radio DJs. It could be.
Well, I hate
doctors.
I would almost like to see that. Since we're talking about this, a classification change from if you target someone because of things like race, sex, gender, profession. Make it all encompassing.
So add the word profession to the law. Maybe that's what has to be done.
I don't know. I think I think in over the years, and I could tell you because I had it personally happen to me.
Yeah.
Off duty, walking into a store, and you see someone. Thankfully, I had pretty good interactions throughout my career. But you arrest a lot of people, and the unfortunate part of it is you have to remember everybody. They only have to remember you.
Right.
And typically, most people remember the guy who arrested them. So,
you're right.
It puts you in an awkward position.
No doubt about it. If you're being targeted because you arrested somebody or they hate cops it should be that is a hate crime. I realize what is a hate crime versus, if it's an attempted murder charge.
I hit you in the head with a hammer because I was high, not because I hate you.
Yeah. So we're only adding.
Well, I've said for years that, in the resisting arrest, getting into the weeds a little bit, but in the resisting arrest law, it's resisting arrest. So it could be so much as somebody pushes you to somebody literally fights you to the death. It's the same charge.
Right.
And I've always felt there should be a felony version of that law that says if during the course of you resisting an arrest you injure a third party, then it's a felony. But it's not. They've never done anything with that law, and I've never understood why they didn't change that.
Well,
Very interesting.
But say if you were trying to arrest me and I resisted and I punched you in the face, wouldn't I get charged with assault on top of it?
Yes. However, what if you injured me? Like, you could punch me and not injure me.
Right. Okay. So we're wrestling and I break your arm. I break your arm I don't intend to break your arm, but us wrestling on the ground, I break your arm.
That should be a felony.
Yeah, I agree.
That's
not assault, though?
It is, but it should be felony as it pertains to resisting arrest, because you have multiple felonies.
Okay.
So I'm not saying because the assault does handle a lot of those things, but as it relates to specifically resisting arrest.
I feel like we get a class every time we bring you in, and I really enjoy it. So,
have you ever sat down and looked at the penal law or the CPL? It's
I rely on you.
Sure, yeah.
We call you. I don't want to read all that. Let me call Hauck.
He's our law enforcement expert,
Steve Hauck. I appreciate
legal
it.
expert here.
Very interesting. We'll talk to Griffo on this, and I'd love to have you maybe in studio when we do it.
Sure.
I got a break.